Erhebt euch, mein Freund. Nobody is to be blamed for COVID 19, but it's accelerating a proportional spiral that must be faced boldly with a lot of audacity and courage, that's for sure. We will keep talking throughout 2022 about the historic impact of this pandemic on mankind's history, as I emphasized on this lately in my video on October the 5th this year. Just a quick metaphor as the world commemorated this month the 80th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack. World War II began on fall 1939. Pearl Harbor was in the beginning, technically, of the third year timeline wise of the war. If you make a comparison that COVID 19 started in fall 2019 and that we are now on that same margin of timeline on December 2021. I don't want to go further down in this comparison. We have a lot of work to do, like I said earlier, in this context of action. Everything in a human capacity must be done. The United Nations Secretary General invoked a powder keg to describe the multilateral financial state of the world. We have to say that things must be said when it comes to the rule of multilateralism and the respective representative of each branch of the United Nations system of member states. How do they really reach their mission and the people they represent in that context of action? This research question would apply on many other aspects, not just the United Nations national governments. But unfortunately, it's gonna stay on a spiral while we are still applying the principle of agreeing on disagreements. A yoke, as I tweeted earlier in French today, a yoke that is hard to break out of ego. Of course, there are exceptions, solution oriented people, while hearing these critics. But the bottom line is that it's a general attitude that can lead to our demise, and the COVID 19 just accelerated that pace big time. So, yes, very important to re-mention what Antonio Guterres said about the powder keg context, but in a time trial on top. It is true that throughout 2021, in person activity and events have resumed, but the majority of our work within the context of the COVID 19 war is still done through the internet and technology. So, what I suggest is that starting from 2022, we create the conditions to build back concretely the social through these tools in order to bring basically balance and therefore symbiosis to needy human actions in order to lower the timeline of the COVID 19 in history. 93 years after 1929, the credit taken worldwide between March and May 2020, subsequently as well during the following months, years. In the United States, we are living this crisis right now that are hitting on doors, the supply chain crisis as well as the coin shortage from the Federal Reserve. I invoked earlier the example of William Tell from a historic perspective, but there are so many things that make us feel that we are on that same situation of gambling with that game throughout this economy. Like I said, the COVID 19 is impacting already boiling environments. If I want to get back to speak about this, we have to understand that the Omicron variant impacted the business. The market went down 10% the day after Thanksgiving. Later, it has been fluctuating up and down. A bailout, if we will not define it in this context, avoided the United States going into depression. But what happens when you are done spending? Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, there is still supply chain crisis, coin shortage, etc. Among the signs of inflations, we can mention the fact that small business will not be hiring, or also when you see the paradigm of buying things related to Christmas, an example, before their time. For example, now instead of the 24th, that goes along with the unfortunate panic that you see every day. The US debt now is the highest it ever been, worth of 150 years of United States debt from the past. Very important to mention the efforts of some companies in this context of action, such as Amazon vis-a-vis the supply chain crisis, and analyze also the relationship between the risk and the return. How to get back to the theory of Markowitz in 1952 by analyzing bond management and improving returns through the factor of time, and who you hire as stock managers is the key to invest increasingly on your assets. A 3D model of portfolio investment would include the factor of volatility, which means government debt ceiling must be analyzed, and what happened after Thanksgiving could happen again. And managed versus managed risk is very important. The big return is focusing on managing volatility. If we see the periods of time, there was always a decrease between 1900 and 1929. Then there was always an increase of 80% in example. This could apply also to the period between 1929 and 1954, just to get back to past history and the context that came after the depression of 1929. Having a financial advisorship and risk professionalism is very important in order to analyze using stocks, bonds, cash, and also retreating the assets to diversify. Active management is a key in this context of action, trying to buy what's going up. Trends of the markets must be analyzed and avoiding to buy what's going down. Passive management, on its part, does not care about the fluctuations and base its decision making on an indexation instead. So, how to make active management accessible to non-million dollar people or companies is a very important research question in this context of action. Now, if I want to bring the cryptocurrencies, not just from the concept of the pandemic, but in general, and I would say that they are too violent according to many analysts. When it's up, you got to be up. You have to be very aggressive in this kind of context. The crypto dollar is like going to Las Vegas. You have to be very first in terms of reaction to the markets. Robinhood makes dollars when you trade. That's another concept. Either crypto or Robinhood. It's very important to mention that the dollar can't be basically surprised with. NFTs are similar to crypto, and Metaverse, the new objective of the former Facebook, is basically the fact that kids today trust things different than what the old school used to trust in the 1920s. The 1920s people trusted brokers instead. In technology, you'd put $40,000 and lost $100,000 in example in this context of cryptocurrency and NFTs. Very important to analyze in this context of action the old Reaganism with the trust but verified process. Dealing with advisors, as I said, is very important. And finally, data research. They invest a lot on this kind of financial timely topics, and also in order to find the best portfolios. Those are questions that always must be put on the table while analyzing this. And getting back here to the situation that could affect, like I said, not just the United States but many other countries as the trends ongoing, on top with the factor of the pandemic. Therefore, my involvement in the United States public sector outside of the United Nations will be on the federal front, in some occasion at state levels in New York and New Jersey. I'm discussing this possibility right now. Same thing here, a lot of work via video conferences when it comes to in person events. So usually it's in Manhattan or Washington, D.C. As of the next one in New Jersey, I can't forecast if I can be in East Rutherford within the next 15 days. Thank you. Getting back to an important point when we speak about the context of defense of the United States and analyzing the bad ideas, let's say, when it comes to defense and the geographic combatant commands paradigm. So we have to remind that at the end of World War II, there have been a lot of actions, including the one of President Truman, that noted that we must never fight another war the way that the last two were fought. He had the feeling that if the army and navy had fought the enemies as hard as they fought each other, the war would have ended much earlier. Truman established 7 geographically focused commands in December 1946 with the hope that they would prevent this shortcoming from occurring again. The National Security Act of 1947 formalized the United Combatant Command System in law, and subsequent laws in 1958 and 1986 amended and expanded the role of the Geographic Combatant Commands, the COCOMs. Today, 7 geographic COCOMs are responsible for integrating forces across all domains for military operation within their respective areas of integrating the use of shared resources such as logistics supports across LAORs, a system that is basically dividing the world up into mutually exclusive AORs, worked well enough throughout the Cold War and the fleeting unipolar moments of the 1990s. But in today's increasingly complex, connected, and multipolar strategic environment, the geographic COCOM structure is an outdated and counterproductive bad idea that is ripe for replacement for 3 main reasons. First, the strategic challenges we face increasingly extend across the static boundaries the geographic COCOMs are based upon. It is naive to think that a conflict with either China or Russia would stay confined to one AOR, and these global threats create coordination challenges among the COCOMs for determining, one, who is supporting whom with what, and two, who is planning for what and with whom. Moreover, it is difficult to draw distinct lines around each COCOM's AOR because many countries could or should be part of multiple AORs. For example, should Turkey be considered part of EUCOM or CNTCOM? What about Israel? Should the Arctic be part of European Command, Northern Command, or Indo-Pacific Command? The way military commands are organized can have a profound influence on how they prepare for conflict, what types of conflict they are prepared, and how well they perform in a crisis. The truth is that any geographic-based approach will have seams between commands that can trip us up, and the smart adversary can exploit these seams. The second reason is that we need to replace the geographic COCOM structure is that it leads to excessive demand for routine presence operations and low priority. Having geographic commands that cover every inch of the universe, even uninhabitable regions of Antarctica, which fall under the Indo Pacific Command, and the Moon, which falls under the Space Command, inherently leads to thousands of high level military and civilian personnel constantly thinking about how the US military can solve problems in regions that are not a strategic priority or wherein the US military's role should be minimal. For example, CENTCOM is no longer the strategic focus of the US military, but it has a huge influence on the demand for forces and military readiness because of the status afforded it as a COM. The geographic commands create inertia for continuing to resource low priority missions that keep them relevant, and the military service use this artificially inflated demand signal to support force structure and budget decisions that are not in alignment with this strategy. It is the definition of self-licking ice cream cone. The third reason geographic COCOMs are a bad idea, in case that wasn't enough to convince you, is that they contribute to the over militarization of US foreign policy. The COCOMs have larger staffs and deeper resources, personal equipment, etc. They can draw from the military services than the State Department or other parts of the US government. This allows them to develop deeper regional and country-specific expertise, but it can also effectively crowd out other diplomatic economic efforts to engage countries. As a result, the face of United States government some nations primarily sees as a primarily military one rather than a diplomatic one. Otherwise, to be clear, the criticism of the current COCOM structure does not include the functional commands, transportation command, strategic command, cyber command, and special operations command. They serve as an important coordinating function for inherently global activities and for resources that are shared across the military services. The structure of the functional commands is largely sound and continues to be relevant. I would redesignate Space Command as a functional command like it used to be and consider creating a new command and control functional command. We just need to figure out a better name than COM. By no means the first call for reform of the geographic COCOM structure, and many good alternatives are possible. For such a sweeping change to be effective, it must be cooperative efforts between the administrative bodies in the United States. Three key factors that should guide the development of an alternative construct. First, the alignment with other U.S. government departments and agencies are organized and minimization of redundant functions in the COCOMs. Second, the structural incentives that keep the military focused on the highest strategic priority. And third, clear lines of authority and responsibility for military planning and operations. For example, one idea would be to create operational COCOMs responsible for planning and prosecuting contingencies, and these operational commands could be organized around enduring strategic threats rather than geographical boundaries. Temporary operational commands could be established as required for the other missions when crises arise, such as natural disasters and pandemics, but these would not remain in place on a steady-state basis to avoid detracting from enduring strategic priorities. While it is true that there are seams in this approach as well, such as contingencies that don't involve other countries or global terrorism, but the difference in this approach is that these seams are by design in areas of low strategic priority. We may not be well prepared. It puts the State Department, intelligence community, and other parts of the United States government in a better position to lead interactions and develop contingency plans in areas where the United States military should have a secondary or tertiary role. The military is a labyrinth of competing interests, and this is largely by design. Many of these competitions serve as positive incentives to simulate new ideas and capabilities in order to provide redundancy and depth that reduce the risks of strategic failure. But the inherent competition for resources among the geographic commands is not serving the nation well. It needlessly complicates the planning and wartime operation. distracts also from higher priority missions and overly militarizing the United States foreign policy. By many accounts, the force is at a breaking point due to no small measures to the high operational tempo the geographic COCOMs are demanding. I don't pretend to have the only answer or the best answer, or no organizational structure will be without flaws, but we can do better and there is no time to waste in terms of trying. Getting back here a little bit to the topic of the pandemic, as I'm glad to read from Mark Sussman, the CEO of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and related to the efforts and reminding that in 2019 around 200 million children were either significantly underweight or suffering from stunning because they weren't getting enough to eat. And it is a sobering fact and a problem that's become even more urgent as COVID-19 has commanded so much of the world's attention, diverting resources away from food programs and basic healthcare. By the end of 2022, an additional 11.9 million children are projected to be suffering from stunting or wasting because of this shift. Each of those children deserves so much more. As Gargi Ghosh, president of the Gates Foundation on Global Policy and Advisory Division, explains that improving nutrition for the world's poorest people isn't just the right thing to do, it will deliver economic benefits too. That's why governments, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and philanthropies, including the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, came together in order to speak regarding the Nutrition for Growth Summit to focus attention and funding more than $27 billion in this persistent problem. Besides the nutrition, Mark Sussman also spoke about thinking about the Southern Africa issues and the scientists who identified the new COVID-19 variant dubbed Omicron in quick succession. Researchers in Botswana, in South Africa, and also in Hong Kong shared their data globally, practicing the kind of transparency the world needs in order to fight the pandemic. In response, large portion of the world banned travel to or from southern African countries, even though 24 other countries have also detected Omicron. Also the point that Sheikh Omar Saidi, who leads the foundation's work in Africa, shared the perspective of Southern Africans in reaction to this news. And very important also to focus on data and vital action in order to analyze furthermore this issue of selective travel bans, in order to have furthermore transparency, which basically is not something that will hurt science. So the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation work requires looking at some hard truths. Too many children are dying from preventable diseases, gender inequality, keeping women from jobs and girls from school, climate change, and the global imbalances in vaccine access. Yet we don't believe these problems are intractable. It's very important to stay optimistic because the work with so many committed partners who are supporting positive and even life-saving results. Years ago, the foundation began receiving a steady stream of envelopes in the mail, some containing a few dollars with much more, and often accompanied in handwritten notes asking that the money go to help others. Expected donations come from individuals who share the vision in support of global health development and education. I do believe that we have to work in this context of action hands in hands from the perspective of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but also outside of the foundation, to witness substantial trials against COVID-19 starting 2022 with new treatments, more vaccines flowing in low-income countries, and increasing attentions to global inequities. I had several video conferences about the religious topics. We spoke about Judaism, Islam. That last point that I was speaking about lately was about Christianity, to be specific. As you know, it's an important topic that goes at the advice of the Catholic Church, at the advice of the Protestant Church, at the advice of the clergy. Very famous topic that has also been mentioned in the past by Cardinal Lorscheider of Brazil. I would like now to speak a little bit about cybersecurity and getting back to the phishing campaign that used PowerPoint macros to drop Agent Tesla, not to confuse with Elon Musk's Tesla. So, in order to analyze this topic, we have to identify the new variant of the Agent Tesla malware that has been spotted in an ongoing phishing campaign that relies on Microsoft PowerPoint documents laced with malicious microcodes. Agent Tesla is a .NET based info stealer that has been circulating in the internet for many years but remains a threat in the hands of phishing actors. I think it has been circulated since 2014, if I'm not wrong. In June 2021, it's very important to report about the active distribution of Agent Tesla and DHL-themed phishing campaigns that relied on the atypical WIM file attachments. So, when it comes to this discussion, very important to analyze that in the most recent campaigns, researchers explain that threat actors are targeting Korean users with emails that allegedly contain order details. Because the attachment is a PowerPoint file, the chances of convincing the recipients they need to enable content of Microsoft Office to view it properly increase. We are speaking from analysis here from VBA code to PowerShell. If opened, the file doesn't present any slide but instead launches an auto-run VBA function that calls for the execution of a remote HTML resource at a remote site. After the escaped VBS script code is executed, the actor can use a range of scripts, including PowerShell, in order to deliver with stealth Agent Tesla. Fortinet has spotted basically this following scripts and their roles. You can define them as anomalies. VB scripts embedded in HTML upgrades the malware every 2 hours if available by adding a command into task. And there was also issue related to standalone VBS file, downloads of a new base64 enclosed VBS file and adds to the startup folder for persistence. Second, standalone VBAs, which are downloads of Agent Tesla and craft PowerShell code. PowerShell code that executes as well a call function class library tree class.1run that performs a process hollowing, passing the Agent Tesla payload in memory. The malware is injected, in other words, into the legitimate Microsoft .NET regasm.exe executable via 4-window API functions by injecting the file into regasm.exe. Agent Tesla can operate in the infected system fileless, so the chances of being detected drop significantly. Targeting a range of products is one of the objectives of this. Agent Tesla features a keylogger, a browser cookie, and saved credential stealers, a clipboard data sniffer, and even a screenshot tool. The attacker can choose the features to enable during the payload compilation, thus choosing between a balance of power and stealth. When it comes to exfiltrating the collected data, the malware offers 4 ways to do it, namely HTTP post, FTP upload, SMTP, and Telegram. Each packet sent carries a number that signifies its. When it comes to exfiltrating the collected data, the malware offers 4 ways to do it, namely HTTP post, FTP upload, SMTP, and Telegram. Each packet sent carries a number that signifies its type, and there are 7 kinds of packets. Packet 0, it is always the first packet to tell the attacker that Agent Tesla has started. It only contains the header data. Packet 1, it is sent once every 120 seconds. It is like a heartbeat to tell the attacker that Agent Tesla is alive. It only contains the header data as well. Packet 2, it is sent every 60 seconds, basically only containing the header data. Agent Tesla reads the response and checks if it contains an install. If yes, it uninstalls Agent Tesla from the victim's system, including deleting all files made by Agent Tesla and removing keys from registry that Agent Tesla created, and exits the process. Packet 3 sends the victim's keylogger data and stolen clipboard data within the data part of the post. Packet 4 sends captured screenshot of the victim's screen within pretty much the data part of the post. Packet 5 sends the credentials stolen from the software clients within the data part of the post. Packet 6 sends cookies files in a zip archive that are collected from browsers included within the data part of the post. And packet 7 is very MISC in this context of action, and the consists of on a packet number, a victim ID, a date and time, a username and a computer name, as well as an identification of stolen data. So to protect from this right now, it is recommended, since Agent Tesla infections are very severe, to easily avoid them if unsolicited emails are deleted immediately upon reception. Proper documents should be treated with extreme cautions, as VBA macros can be as dangerous as their Excel counterparts. In summary, it must important to keep internet security shields up, software up to date, Microsoft Office macros disabled, and curiosity in check. From the perspective of research of the Palo Alto network in cybersecurity, looking forward to analyze furthermore the Unit 42 Apache Log4j threat, and as you may know, on December 9, 2021, a remote code execution RCE vulnerability in Apache Log4j was identified as being exploited in the wild. Highly recommended to update vulnerable system to the latest version of Apache Log4j for all systems. Apache Log4j is an open source login basically utility that is leveraged within numerous Java applications around the world. It's a large footprint that makes the vulnerability affect almost everyone. It's very important to analyze the release of the proof of concept code, and subsequent investigation revealed that the exploitation was incredibly easy to perform by submitting a specially crafted request to a vulnerable system. The attacker can instruct the system to download and subsequently execute a malicious payload. So looking forward to following with the Palo Alto network regarding the training in this matter on next generation firewalls, the NGFWs, that includes threat prevention, Cortex XDR, Cortex XSOAR, Prisma Cloud Defender, and as well looking onto the analysis of live threat briefings. Wrapping up with the nuclear topic, to get back here to the updates from colleagues from the Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy, in order to speak about the fact that New York City Council adopted a resolution calling for the investment of pension funds from nuclear arms makers. That means that basically the New York City Council adopted a legislative package greatly strengthening the city's existing nuclear weapons free zone. In a major step, a resolution calls on the controller to divest city pension funds from nuclear weapons manufacturers. It also joins New York City to the ICAN city's appeal and calls on the United States to join the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. A companion bill establishes an advisory committee to further education and community participation related to the zone. Very important also to speak about the endeavors of LCNP, a World Peace Congress, related to nuclear abolition. They must exist side by side with other movements throughout the world. So the LCNP basically focused on the International Peace Bureau World Peace Congress by explaining how it is important to have reliance on nuclear weapons to be incompatible with the rights to life set out in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Very important to mention here the disproportionate impact on indigenous people that highlights also the truth about nuclear weapons. The weapons are part of a larger world order which privileges a few powerful actors by wreaking violence on everyone else and threatening the deprivation of life. Following up with these issues of the nuclear as early as January 2022 with the events that will be organized at the United Nations, the NPT Review Conference, basically the 10th Review Conference of the parties to the Treaty of the Non-Proliferation on Nuclear Weapons. And also I will get back on my next video on a history of nuclear race parts to understand the problem and its research questions. 2021 ne fut pas d'un bon cru. La guerre de la COVID-19 est un test pour l'humanité sur tous les aspects. Du courage, il le faut.